Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of End VNture podcast, where your hosts, Taros113 and MR, discuss favorite visual novels and other news in the industry. Today's episode is going to be about Zany interfaces in various visual novels. Now, the basic structure of a visual novel is pretty standard. You have the text box, and you have a character sprite on the screen and background art and music. But sometimes you get some creative usages that break the norms of what a visual novel should look like. Now, right off the bat, I do want to mention one of the most famous ones that instantly popped into mind was Never Seven's rainbow text box. It's right here on the screen if you can see it, and it is a rainbow from left to right going through all the colors in a blur. It really made it a pain to read. This was not a design choice for the better. So
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, there are other titles that try to be different in better ways that accomplish its goals more in line with what the VN is saying. So MR actually has one heck of an example to talk about right now.
Yep. My first example I want to start with is Muramasa. Oh boy, where do I even start? It's a story about samurai code and a way of life. And with that, a mecha story mixed with a lingering mystery around a looming doom over the entire nation. It's an alternative universe, near future or maybe futuristic world, in which the military-industrial complex took a detour from our understanding and our history. From producing armors, as we know, tanks, rather they produce literal armors one wears on themselves, a kind of mecha power suit. The control of such a powerful item dictates how those countries developed. They have their process of creation is also always shrouded in mystery. No one really knows what the process entails. And that's one of the central mysteries, truly, where they came to be and what are their purpose, truly, in this world. But more than that, I just want to bring focus on aspect of how UI in the Muramasa plays a role in showing the differences in settings, I would say. So one distinctive change they tend to use whenever there is an insanity, a very chaotic moment, the entire text box disappears and you get a song with lyrics of which are distinctly written in a different character font on the entire screen that is purposely an amalgamation of erratic things describing insanity, and I chosen a very specific screenshot to illustrate that.
Mm-hmm. Just words floating on top of a very chaotic background, right?
Yes, and this is something that was very hard to capture and maybe I should have made a GIF of it, because the entire background pulses.
Ooh.
In addition to all of that, so it purposely makes it very hard to read when all those pictures, heads, limbs fluctuate to left to right, to left to right, and there is no solid background for you to read the words on. And again, they try to illustrate the insanity of it all. The complete lack of, I wouldn't say consciousness, but conscious thought and reason with those moments. And yeah, those made for a very atmospheric and very tense moments when everybody loses their minds. And I do believe this stylistic choice for UI really helped to sell those moments.
Because I want to mention, you just said it right there. There are many books and pieces of literature that rely on the writing to convey these emotions, but with visual novels, you have an entire UI available. And like you're describing here with Muramasa, there's many ways they're using their visuals to convey those feelings of insanity, right?
Yep. Now that you brought in books, I have a lot more examples there, because books are not that different when we strictly talk about text from visual novels. And I distinctly remember there's one technique that leaves suspension, what will happen next, on the bottom right corner on a page, on the right page, because that's the moment you flip the page to the next one. So you do not make a suspense on the left upper side on the left page, because you have so much text ahead of you, you see visually with your eyes. But you leave it specifically on the right page, on the last moment, and you flip, and then it's a twist. One thing I remember vividly is Data Life light novel made use of that specific trick, that they left a plot twist on the right last page, then you flip it, and there's one word repeated on two next pages all the time.
Ooh.
Because they wanted to sell the despair so much. And that was a good moment, I remember.
Okay. So that's the way the UI is really selling the emotion.
Yeah, exactly. And this is very similar to how Muramasa's Insanity was trying to sell. You had a normal conversation, you have normal people, you had normal CG with normal text boxes, and suddenly you hear a song and everything warps. And it transitions into that erratic thing you can't really describe, with a very distinctive song and words.
Mm-hmm.
Lyrics, I mean. So that's one moment. And the other part, the two other screenshots I chose, are very interesting, because while they look mundane, the way they are used is to convey the nationalities or maybe language the characters use. So in that setting, in Muramasa, you have more or less alternative alternative universe equivalent of Japan and alternative universe equivalent of other nations. So you have Great Britain, America, Russia, etc. And what they did with those UIs is make one type of UI specifically for when only foreigners speak. So I made one screenshot when there is a horizontal text box on the bottom, and it's reserved only when foreigners, in this example, people from Great Britain, speak, and it's only for all the foreigners. If characters speak in the Japanese or their equivalent Muramasa, then the normal text box is used.
And that normal vertical stretchy text box.
The normal vertical. And the funny thing is, in between scenes, when you have now Japanese people speaking, now British people speaking, you keep tracking who is where on which side of the factions at war. So that's interesting. Also, when, for example, one of the British people goes to speak with a Japanese person, he uses the Japanese language, so he goes put into the wrong style of text boxes, which was also a very interesting approach. Yeah, because amongst themselves, they can speak British or American or whatever they want. But with a Japanese person, they have to speak their language. So I found it very interesting how they convey it.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it ties more into the whole idea of factions involved.
Yes.
Where people are picking sides, and it really emphasizes where people stand on issues more than individuals.
Yeah, I think this helped a little bit because Muramasa has a lot of characters. quite a few factions, and probably factions within a faction. Again, no spoilers. And this kind of separation helped distinguish who's where. So you had a visual cue. You could more or less put people, those are foreigners, so probably from the invading or occupying nations. And those are locals, so from Japanese government or rebellion forces.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually very interesting. I haven't seen anything like that, because even in other titles that have multiple factions, multiple countries, a lot of interest of factions intertwined, they often share the UI. Yet with Muramasa specifically, they said, no, let's give those factions their own text boxes, and the rest can have default, for example. And I found that intriguing.
Mm-hmm. I remember that whole vertical, different text box thing was a frequent point of concern before Muramasa got translated into English. Because in Japanese script, of course, it can be arranged top to bottom instead of left to right like English letters are.
Yeah.
You can't really do that with English letters. That take up way too much space really fast. But, now the VN is released in English and it still works out. Where obviously, if you compare the two screenshots from like an English copy versus the original Japanese copy, they had to make some changes. The vertical text box are a lot fatter to compensate.
Yeah.
But you like you said, you still get that faction layout,
Yep. And some words are weirdly broken and sentences to accommodate the space that is on the vertical style. Fair enough, this is a consequence of translating to a language that tends to have very long words you have to break down. It's a consequence, and in a Japanese, I guess you could make those characters more compact to suit that style. Fair enough. But in my opinion, it still worked. I read it without any problems whatsoever. So there's that.
Mm-hmm. All right. In that case, if you've said everything you'd like about Muramasa, then I can bring up one pretty cool example. If that's okay with you, MR?
I did say everything I want to say about Muramasa regarding UI.
Oh, you got more. Oh, baby.
I mean, multiple times I talked about Muramasa's storytelling. I don't want to tread that ground once more of how predictable common route was with all the points and twists they had. And some of the routes also were pretty predictable, although they did a better job on it. But that's kind of outside of scope of user interface. Although, now that I think about it, probably should have included that example, or maybe not because it's a kind of spoiler, because Muramasa has some gameplay elements, but unlike most of the gameplay variants, they use the normal visual novel dialogue to achieve them, and that's janky as heck.
Normal visual novel dialogue? What do you mean?
Yeah, instead of having a dedicated UI to gameplay, they use the normal choice-based boxes to convey the gameplay. And sometimes it's super janky because of that. So the most cited example of gameplay is the point-and-click idea. And it's still built upon the choices as a normal visual novel, instead of being able to click on the background or something like that. If you remember Lucy, it had a very brief moment when you could interact with environment early on.
Correct.
And they used that. You could click on background. It felt quite natural. Yeah, you look around, you can highlight objects. In the Muramasa's case, it would be you had 4 choices, which do you want to press? So even though people tend to talk about gameplay element, I don't really agree, because there was no gameplay in it.
Okay.
If it uses text boxes and choices, it uses text and characters, and it plays like a visual novel, it's a visual novel. It's very hard point to argue if it's a point and click, if it doesn't use many of the point and clicks elements. You don't really point, but you do click. So do you in visual novel.
Mm-hmm. Using just the, 4 choice selections that they usually show.
Yeah, 4, sometimes 7, sometimes 9, so it was very annoying. Seeing all the choices clustered. But yeah. Probably I would advise making a separate UI for the gameplay segments. That's what I wanted to just end on with Muramasa.
Okay. Wow. Muramasa had a lot going for it, huh?
I did. I still recommend that title for especially those that do not often guess the plot twists. Maybe they'll enjoy a bit more than me. Ooh. I still think it's amazing story, even though I guessed a lot of early twists easily.
That's always a shame. I mean, I guess that just because it's predictable doesn't always mean it's bad. At least it's making sense, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
I would prefer that over a visual novel that just makes up nonsense as some sort of twist.
Yeah, and I'm a person who values build up. I mean, world building, yeah, but we talked about that at length. But build up and payoff, and in my opinion, the ending is satisfying, very much so. It lives up to the hype. It's definitely a payoff in my book.
Okay. Well, that's a lot about Muramasa.
Yeah.
Next, for my example that I wanted to show about neat user interfaces is a small title called End Junction.
Okay.
This one is just like how Muramasa took place in a fictional Japan sort of thing. This one takes place in a fictional Wild Wild West.
Ooh.
And so it focuses on the main character, who is a teenage girl in a small town who gets thrust into adventure. And there's some fantasy elements too, but for the most part, you follow her as she roams the area, meeting new people and running into danger. Now, if you can see as the screenshots as they're scrolling up on the video, there's no real text box to it. A lot of the dialogue and narration is structured like text boxes. No, sorry, not text boxes, like speech bubbles, like the kind you'd see in old-fashioned comic books. And you see a lot of cutouts of character sprites as they pop in and out as they speak, and they're arranged, in different places on the screen to show height and to make conversations more dynamic. And all of it really contributes to it feeling like an old comic. It's something befitting of the old Wild West art style, story, and general feel of it all.
Yeah, I was going to mention, now that I'm looking at that title with the screenshots we've put in, it bears more resemblance to comic than manga, which I would assume should be closer to Japanese style of visual novel, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, there's the art style, how it has a more Western bent to it, so that affects some things. But also, it's it's pretty freeform with the speech bubbles. And a lot of it really plays into the developers' ideals behind it, how they wanted to make it feel like a dime novel from way back in the day.
Ooh.
The sort of, really cheap paperback stories you could get in stores for a dime.
Huh.
And yeah, like I gotta say, all of the style elements with the unique UI really contribute toward it. Between all the characters and the grand adventures that they go on, and making friends and journeying across the land. All of it, like if I try imagining this in the typical VN style where you have sprites on the background and you have a text box on the bottom and just static sprites on the background CGs, like it would feel a lot more structured. And this is one of those stories that doesn't really feel structured. It feels very free-form, just like how the UI has its own unique structure in its own way, and that helps parallel what the VN itself is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm looking at it and I'm imagining in my head how it would look like a typical VN. It would definitely be so much less dynamic. You would not sell that wanderlust, that adventurousness, that even that riding on a horse gives you so much more impact. You see that screen transition, and it fits really nice. It sells that idea of briskness.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's not to say that it couldn't have accomplished that if it was in a more typical style. There's another small-time VN I've read called The Falconer's Moonlight, how it also takes place in a fictional Wild Wild West setting. And it does follow more conventional VN styles, but it still has that sense of adventure and danger involved. And as much as I liked The Falconer's Moonlight, when you compare it to something that was really unique and stand out as End Junction is, I really have to give the edge to this one.
This is definitely very unique.
Yes, it makes it a lot more unique and it helps it stand out,
True. And it stands out in a very useful to the story way, instead of the Never 7 example that you brought.
Oh my goodness, yes. It's one, and a lot of what it does, doesn't interfere. It always shows who the speaker is when someone's talking. You see sound effects pop up, every so often. How, like the hooves of a horse as it's running by, or a gun goes off and you see it bang, just like the old comic sort of thing. It pops up for a sec and then goes away. All of them, still, they give style, but they still help convey the story and the message to the reader. It's not like that Never 7 rainbow text box you just pointed out, where it was kind of frustrating to read on that thing the whole time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, a lot of time with the, funny UI tricks, readability still needs to be the most important,
True. The novelty. If the novelty is not worth the pain, so for example, it obfuscates the text, then it's like, no, by making it look unique, you basically made it harder to read.
Yeah, like it was a change, but it wasn't for the better.
Yeah.
But anyways, I really do like End Junction. It was an episodic release, which sucked because I'm pretty sure the developers did not have a plan in place from the beginning. They were just kind of making it up each time. That led to some really disjointed story beats, but oh well.
This is something I always appreciate, when the episodic nature does not interfere with the quality. And it can be an episodic in a sense that, literally they have episodes, but more so, it can be episodic in a way that it's a part of a long series that have a very consistent story they want to tell.
Yeah, you said it. That's the important part. Having a consistent story from the start, Otherwise, it's just exactly. I'm just in it for the ride as they make it up, and I'm being taken along. I wish I knew where we were going.
Yeah, exactly. And for those who really wish me to name drop what I had in mind for long-standing series, who had a consistent idea of what they wanted to tell. I meant Run series, okay?
Yeah, you love the Rant series.
Yeah. I had to mention it, okay? For those who really waited for that one name, here you have it.
Aye. Well, okay. Getting this podcast episode back on track. So yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say about Dead End Junction. I really appreciate its art style and the non-traditional format it uses for a visual novel.
True. It's definitely not traditional, although changing the topic because I prepared another one this time. Yotsunoha will continue on with those style of popping text boxes. But first things first, let me introduce Yotsunoha real fast. It's a story about revisiting the past in the present with aid of time capsule. A pretty quiet and somber visual novel, contrasted with full-mouthed and outspoken protagonist that makes use of very unique UI. A pop-up text boxes like you shown with Dead End Junction. They replace the standard text boxes with... How can I even describe it? Sorry, it also replaces text boxes with diary entries. So sometimes completely the text box disappears and you read diary entries. And all of that is stylized in a matter of sheet of paper taken out of a notepad. So it has that resemblance to a school accessory, school setting. And it all has to contribute to the idea of revisiting school days. And the main action takes place in an abandoned and closed down school in summer, 3 years after the main character group split up. So the basic setting is that in the past, school is closing down. All the characters are going to split up in their different walks of life. And they promised each other they will gather here in 3 years' time and revisit that memories. And this is the story about that. They finagle some way to get the keys to open that abandoned school, and they spend some summertime there. And holy hell, what a unique stylized it is. I tried to gather as much as possible with those examples of Zany UI here. But first and foremost, you have the stylized text boxes, like you've shown in Dead End Junction. That is a pop-up window with a text. But I think, unlike Dead End Junction, please correct me if I'm wrong, those are dynamic.
Yeah.
So when characters are talking, they appear, even if they obfuscate another character who just finished talking, or maybe by appearing, they stop them talking. So there's one specific screenshot I chose with a really, when the protagonist was going to explain themselves, but they already doubted his intention with a really and stopped him talking by placing their own pop-up box on top of the protagonist. And I never saw that used, and that was so well crafted here. It looks so interesting. And if you see a lot of text boxes at the same time from many different characters, it sells you the idea of crowd really well. There's a lot of people talking. Yes, people are talking on top of other people, which happens all the time in real life. And they sell that really well. So never before I have seen that. And funnily enough, the idea of a backlog, so going back and looking at what was written before, is just closing the pop-up windows. So
closing pop-up windows?
Yeah, if you look closely on those screenshots that I provided, you'll see that those boxes have an X on top right corner.
Oh wow, you're right, yeah.
You can close it and see what's behind that.
Oh, so in a way that's kind of the history log. It's like, oh crap, I missed a line.
Yes, exactly.
And now someone just talked over it. It's like, how can I see what I missed?
Yes.
Wow, that is pretty unique, yeah.
Yeah, I just loved how they sold all of that. There are some other stylistic choices. So, for example, because it takes place in school, the school has many floors and many classrooms. If you're outside of classroom, you want a 3D mini game kind of thing with rendered characters and you move around. I added one screenshot to the gallery to illustrate that point. That was kind of zany, although in a weird way.
Okay, like it goes all Persona for a second. Huh?
Yes, it does. And even during that segment, characters keep talking, and those pop-up boxes keep appearing. So I don't know how to separate. Is that gameplay or is it not? It kind of transitions between events or between stages, I guess. It's weird to describe, right? But it's kind of adds to the atmosphere. That I'll give them. That adds to the atmosphere. There's a lot of empty and or closed rooms. You revisit, because it's abandoned school. Duh. And sometimes you scour the school looking for some supplies because, for example, you need kitchen utensils to make a dinner. And that was one of the points in the story. To find something to cook in.
Cooking scenes.
Yeah, obviously,
Oh boy, just off the heels of the slice of life talk.
Yeah. I know. I said that's one of the, when saying about Saku Saku, that's one of the few slice of life games I liked. Probably Yotsunoha is slice of life enough for me to say, yeah, I found one more. And this is probably the pure one without fantastic and surreal elements. Although, for me specifically, the atmosphere it sold with the use of UI was the hook. Because every time I was like, okay, what will be next crazy thing you'll do with UI? One of which, maybe it's not that crazy, when they drop off all the text boxes and make you read out diaries in the CG form, but translated you can read everything what's on the diary itself. It's not that crazy, but it's still stylistically different enough and works with the atmosphere of those school notes.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that element also, even though it's not the most crazy.
Maybe not crazy, but definitely unique. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what else you'll see that handles its discussions like that.
Sure. And one of those elements of the CG with full text was the Akitsu to Zeneko. It's a girl wish fortune-telling game in which you use character name to determine their compatibility. And that's one of those very few things I had to stop the game, write down the rules, and figure out what's the solution to that game. Because that would be a point in the story, and I wanted to specifically try it out myself. And I understood immediately where the twist is going, and I was so amazed. That was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because they actually made it depending on what, how can I say, whether or not you understand how to perform it good, you either have a positive result or negative. And that's the point of the drama. Have you used the first name or the second name? Which should you? Sorry, not first or last name, because those are different results. And is it a positive fortune-telling result or maybe negative?
Plus, there's the different cultural meanings too behind the name.
Exactly. So that was really cool idea, and one of those things I had to stop and figure it out. And many different things in that game contributed to its core atmosphere and settings, and I loved it for it.
All right, then on that note, I think that's a good time as ever to wrap up today's episode then.
Yeah. Exactly.
Time went by like a breeze, huh?
Exactly. I had to I had to constrain myself not to go even longer Yotsunoha and just made important points for the Zany UI.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time, exactly.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to listen to this week's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions or any other suggestions, then please let us know. We always appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening.
Yep. Thank you and goodbye.